Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by prolific and acclaimed director Nzingha Stewart, whose latest project is the Prime Video series Daisy Jones and the Six. I absolutely love this show. I thought it was so great. I know you're executive producer on it as well. You directed 4 of the final 5 episodes. So I guess I want to ask you, when you came in, I guess, like, how did you pick up, like, kind of the baton, I guess, from the first half of the season? Had you guys discuss, like, how you would kind of make the second half stand out from the first season? Because there obviously is, like, evolution in the show, and so these back half of the season has to be maybe a little different than the front.
Yeah, when I first talked to Scott Newstetter, once we decided we were going to work together on this, Scott sort of said the words every director wants to hear, which is, I want you to make this block your own. And don't worry about what the first block is doing. I've envisioned this as 2 separate movies, where the first movie is about a small, scrappy band from Pittsburgh, and the second half is like they're the biggest band on earth. So, and that obviously those 2 things look differently. And thought a lot about, like, what does it look like when you're the biggest band on earth? And it wasn't there's more money now, and so things are slicker and glossier. For me, it was there's more money now, so your real self is put on display for everybody, and things get messy, and there's more access to your vices and to people enabling you to and encouraging bad behavior and thinking like that's part of rock star lifestyle. So the second block for me was messy. I got a lot of inspiration from Goodfellas, which is a weird thing to reference in a 70s rock show, but it felt like in the second half of Goodfellas, like the more money they had, the more things were falling apart. Like they were getting messy with the coke, with the drugs, loose lips. Like it became problematic to have that much at their disposal. And that's what I felt like the second block should be. I remember we were on set, and the editors called frantically saying, the post supervisor, we have to have this big meeting at lunch because the second block doesn't look anything like the first block, and like everybody was terrified. And I'm right about to start shooting the big finale concert scene when we get this call, and just was like sick to my stomach, and like had to power through waiting for lunch, like feeling like I've ruined the show. And we get on the call, and and I was like, so what's the problem? And I'm thinking I couldn't be that bad because I've been seeing the footage like in front of me on the monitors, and I love it. And they were like, it looks nothing like it. It's messy, and it's handheld, and it's not as, and I'm thinking like, oh, well, is that the problem? Because it was never intended to look anything like block one. Me and Scott talked about this, and so it was like, okay, if that's the only problem, good. That was intentional. So yeah, it definitely purposefully felt like my own, and was a unique situation because you never hear we want it to look nothing like everything else we've done up until now. You have
Right.
your own director of photography, your own first AD, make it yours.
That's incredible. And I will say, like, having watched it, I just love you capture I not think of Goodfellas obviously until you just said it, but the pace of the last episodes is just relentless, and like you really are, like, that's such a hallmark of Goodfellas. Obviously, the speed and the just you really get kind of caught up in it, and I think that's really emblematic of this show too. You just kind of like are along for the ride, and are really watching the downfall. It's like just a great mix. It really is just so good.
And the joy of filmmaking in Goodfellas, like it feels like you're hurling yourself at the subject. And
Yeah.
that was what we tried to do, is like we are just throwing ourselves at Billy and Daisy, during this episode, and just enjoying like running in with a camera and like chasing them around. And it was fun. It was fun to shoot.
You mentioned, like, obviously that final concert is so incredible. I know you started your career in music videos. You've directed like a numerous amount of incredible music videos as well. In addition to like all the great TV, you've also directed. I guess, like, how much, I guess, did that help, or did that not help with like directing like the big concert scenes? Because I think one of the things I really liked about the show was that, a lot of, like, it's like when I watch like a sports movie, you can tell, like, when something doesn't feel real, right? But like the concert here, I was like, I know it's like it felt real. It felt like I was watching like real concerts. So I just thought that was like really great. And I guess, like, how did you kind of do that? And did your music video background maybe help there at all, or not?
Um, Doing music videos definitely helped. It helped with the confidence to shoot musicians. I felt like I know how musicians work, and so it really helped with directing the actors more than anything, knowing that they had to feel like real musicians. In the back of my head, I always knew, when you work with musicians, it is a very different beast than when you work with actors. Musicians are always sort of making you audition for them, and actors are used to auditioning for a director. So the energy already is a little bit different. And I always was watching to make sure that was Daisy's interaction with everybody, that she was sort of like laying back, waiting for you to impress me. That is, and just knowing that in the DNA of musicians helped me just work with actors and check for certain things. And shooting music, I felt like I can do this. I've done it before. But then you step into an arena and it's, and thousands of empty seats, and you're like, I never did this before. Like, I've shot in nightclubs, and so then it's like your prep work really takes over, because only having done this before would have prepared you for doing the scale and the scope for doing this.
Yeah, it's incredible. You did a great job. You don't need me to tell you that, I'm sure, because you've seen it,
Thank
but
you.
you did a very good job. You
Thank you.
mentioned, I love, obviously, like the relationship between Daisy and Billy is incredible, and I think those performances are really wonderful. Both Sam and Riley are so good. And in the finale, I just wanted to jump to that. You have the very last moment. You mentioned Goodfellas before. I always think of like when you have like this. I would say the ending of Daisy Jones is more hopeful than this, but I was like kind of like a Graduate ending where you're just not sure like what's going to happen, right? So like that is another hallmark I had, at least watching it. And I just love the final shot, and I love the whole sequence there. And I guess, like, yeah, can you talk about how you thought about that scene and like their kind of reunion all those years later, and leaving it, yeah, like finding that tone where you're like, oh, there is hope, but like you're not sure what's going to happen next. And I just found that like really incredible with your filmmaking, and like obviously the performances too.
I usually a scene like that you have to stick the landing or the show doesn't work. Like the whole like that scene has to work, or nothing we did before matters. And so usually in a scene like that, I will go into it thinking like all I have to rely on is my gut. If I don't, I do tend to watch the monitor like I'm watching at home. Sometimes I'll, even when I can't figure something out, I'll close my eyes and then open them back up and just pretend I'm in my living room watching it like an audience member, and like what would I pick apart, or as an audience member, do I feel this? Does it resonate emotionally for me? And so I did just sort of sit back and watch the two like I was watching it at home, and it's just for my consumption, like am I moved? And until I felt that, we just had to go again and again. And like I think the ads are always a little bit like, why she only made one little difference, like we have to go again, it looks fine to me. And it just is an emotional thing, like it, until I feel like I'm about to cry, we haven't gotten it.
Hmm.
And there was almost like degrees of smiles with Riley, where I would give her a note that would like change like how much she would smile, or like something to think about, and like see how that resonated on her face. And then there was the moment of like, okay, I felt it. We've got it. We're good. um, they have tons of options just in case, but like there is a take for sure that in my gut, I felt like something happened between the two actors, really. So yeah, that was it.
That's great. You mentioned like the emotion of it. I mean, the other scene that, and I guess it is in the finale, certainly, is Camilla when she adjusts her wig in the thing, that I like immediate cry on that moment. I was just like, it's so moving. And again, it sounds like what you're saying, where you're just like, I guess you just knew that as well, like those. And I know you kind of did. I think you shot all of the talking head stuff. Is that right? I thought I read that. So
Yeah.
like building to that moment, I found like incredible as well. And I guess, not to just ask you again, like, how did you do that scene? But like, that was great. It's a great moment as well. It's just like really incredibly moving, like you said. And
That
like,
was another
especially,
one of those
yeah,
moments of
yeah.
like, until I feel it, we just have to keep going. And we were trying. And then finally, so we did have somebody there to read the scene with Camilla. And finally, she said, it would actually help me, Nzingha, if you read the scene with me. And I was like, no, I don't think you want that, because I'm not going to give you as much as an actor could. Like, I don't have that skill set at all. And she was like, but it'll move me if it's you. because we had built a relationship. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try it. And so I was sitting on the, it was such a tight space that I was sitting on the dolly next to our camera operator, just talking to her. And he's like a big muscle man Italian operator, and like that nothing moves. He's like a rock, like nothing moves him. And like there was that moment where we were doing the scene where I felt him tear up, and I was like, oh, got it. Like if we can make him cry, like, and not that crying was the goal, but feeling something was the goal. And so there was, once I felt like he felt it, and I turned around and Lauren Neustadt was sitting behind me. She was tears coming down her face. I look back and I'm like, I'm crying. We got the scene. And that's all you have to rely on. There's not a magic formula like, oh, she cried, we've got it. Sometimes that doesn't even matter. It's just like, is the viewer moved? And all I have to know that by is like, I'm the viewer.
Right. It's incredible. And I mean, I think it pays, like it works. And obviously I think because of the work the show is done in like getting the audience invested in these characters is so key, right? Like the whole, like you love these characters by the end, and like, kind of like it's just a great payoff in the finale. It's just a wonderful episode. It's so,
thank you so much.
Good. Yeah. You mentioned like,
I love this. It makes me so happy when people just say it worked for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Were you a fan? I mean, I'm sure maybe you were. I'm assuming you were a fan of the book before this, and like, I mean, obviously the fans of the show are.
Yeah, I didn't know the book.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. No, that's really good.
I didn't know the book when I remember when we were doing Little Fires Everywhere. I would hear talk of it. Like I would hear the Hello Sunshine people just like, oh, did we get this person for Daisy and that and it just, it's you hear talk and just ignore it. I wonder like, huh, that sounds cool, that project they're working on. Like, but I have a job to do here. Let me just buckle down. And then when we were doing from scratch, Lauren brought it up to me and I was like, you guys didn't do that yet? Because a whole pandemic happened in between Little Fires Everywhere from scratch. And she was like, no, we're about to go into production on it. Like, what's your dance card like? And I'm such a big fan of Scott Newstadter's from 500 Days of Summer that I was like, well, who's the showrunner? And when she was like, Scott Newstadter, I was like, done. My dance card is now clear. We'll have some conversations with everyone else. And Scott alone was for me like a reason to do the show. I knew whatever it would be cool. And then I read the book and felt like I have to be a part of this.
That's really cool. And I think, I mean, that also, because the book's fans, I think, were really responded to the show too. So I think that's interesting. Like, I just think it's interesting having you not having obviously read the book and stuff like you said, but having not come in like as a huge fan before being approached. I think that's interesting. And maybe that's also why it works so well, right? Like that kind of like mix as well. You mentioned,
yeah, there is something about being an objective observer. Even my intake of the book was loose. I'd listen to it on an audiobook, and like I would listen to it like before bed or on a plane. Like I didn't want to give it my full attention because I did want the script to be the thing. And I know with my memory, I will get confused and like be telling actors, because remember when this happens, I'd be like, that doesn't happen in the script. And so it was a real loose, let me not get too invested, let me not be taking notes, like you just hear how it feels. And so there was a little bit of detachment in that way, but I've, since it all happened, like there's been a lot of comparisons to like other famous bands and rock bands. I didn't come into it with that. Like I'm Black. So Bobby and Whitney were like the musician stories that I was raised on, but it helped. It helped me just see it as a script and not, I'm trying to match it to this person or to that person. I can certainly take, I can learn more about it in doing my research, but I can really just approach this as like, these are characters who are showing each other grace in the face of just being human beings, and take it on its own value as opposed to like comparing it to anything else.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned like obviously like Hello Sunshine. You've done so much with them and Lauren and Reese and stuff. And the work is always great, right? I guess like what is the I guess like for you as a filmmaker, like what is it about them as a production company that is able to get this kind of work from so like consistently, over and over again? I feel like these shows are really good. Daisy Jones, no exception. So I guess like how do you think? What do you think it is about them that like gets this kind of level of work?
I think a couple of things. I think that one, they champion stories for women. And so stories that I find interesting and valuable and like thought provoking, they are making those shows. And so I love working with them because they allow us to tell stories about women, but they also, I mean, and this is not a small thing, they also realize like if you give people of color a chance to shine, like they will often do that. And so there wasn't like well, you can do like our diversity projects or like, you know what I mean? It
Mhm.
was like, no, you can do Little Fires Everywhere with Reese, and you can do Daisy Jones, which was their biggest show at the time and still may be. And like, and obviously such a personal project for Lauren because it's her husband's show. Like that is the ultimate gift of trust. And we want to be in business with you and we think you do a great job. So it's there's always those two things at work in the background with Hello Sunshine, but just also the idea of what they did on Daisy, saying bring your own DP, bring your own first AD, you're going to New Orleans, which everything else in the first block was in Los Angeles, like make this your project. That rarely happens. And so you take real ownership as a filmmaker in making it yours and not just like sort of showing up and doing your best, but like trying to fit the mold. It's like, oh, this is exciting. And the same thing happened on From Scratch
Mhm.
and on Little Fires. Like I remember that meeting, like bringing in all these references. And I would never do that for a normal episodic directing experience. But I was like, well, this show is set 20 years earlier than the rest of the episode. It's different actors, it's different sets. Like, can I treat this like a pilot? And they were like, yep. Again, there was no fear about it. It just was like, yes, you should do that. That's a great idea. We like these references. Go for it.
It's amazing. We have to wrap up, and it's so great, and your work is incredible. Like I said, and Daisy Jones is such a great show. Nzingha Stewart. To watch all the episodes of Daisy Jones and the Six on Amazon. But one last thing before I let you go, what was your favorite song from Aurora? I guess.
I honestly change my mind on that every day. And it's one of those things like I remember music videos after hearing a song 10,000 times that day. I never wanted to hear that song ever again. This was like after shooting the concert scenes, I would drive home from work sometimes at 6 in the morning, still listening to the songs. I think I love Let Me Down Easy. It's
Great.
just a beautiful record.
It's
So
really good. Yeah, I have the vinyl. I'm not gonna lie, I listen to it all the
right.
time. It's great.
But I also love When I Needed You, You Were Gone. Like I think
Mhm.
that's a song that like crept up on me. It wasn't an obvious one at first.
It's
I love
great.
the river.
Great.
I mean, it's a good love Honeycomb. It's a good record.
It's a really good record, and it's a great
Yeah,
show. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you so much for doing this.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.